So what is the best way to cook sirloin steak? Should you dry brine it or marinate it? Let's find out as we turn up the tasty. Today we're cooking with sirloin steak, actually two of them, to ask the question, what's the best way to cook a sirloin steak? But specifically, how should it be sort of prepared prior to cooking is the real question. See, I think sirloin steak is sort of like an entry-level steak. At least it was for me. It's not as expensive as some of the other cuts like filet, porterhouse, strip. That comes with some pros and cons. So one of the things is it just doesn't have a lot of fat. And as you hear me say all the time, the fat is where it's at. That's where beef, meat, and definitely steak gets a lot of its flavor. You don't see a lot of fat in there. This right here, which really isn't edible. And the steak has a little bit of chew to it. So we really want to tenderize that steak prior to cooking. Now, I've always marinated it, right? That will impart a lot of good flavors, help break it down a little bit, make it a little bit more tender. But we've had a lot of great success with dry brining our steaks to create tenderness as well as a really great crust as it cooks. So today we're here to really answer that question. What's better, dry brining a sirloin steak or marinating it? Now, if you're not familiar, dry brining is just the process of adding salt to the steak and letting it sit for some period of time prior to cooking. So here I have a tray with some foil and a wire rack. That's gonna allow the air to circulate across the steak as it brines. But in order to dry brine, you only need what you have here and salt. So what I'm gonna do is we're just gonna get this salt here on both sides. Now that might look like a lot of salt. We're gonna lose a lot of it. This side doesn't look as good. We just have a little bit of oxidation going here. It's a little bit of browning of the steak. When you buy this from the butcher, a lot of times they'll have the pretty side facing up and they'll hide some of that oxidated part. It's not bad. It's something you may see on your steaks when you buy them at the store yourself. But essentially, all you have to do is salt it, and then we're gonna put this in the fridge for 24 hours and let the salt do its job. What it's essentially going to do is it's first going to bring the moisture out of the meat. Then after about 20 to 30 minutes, that moisture is going to return into the meat. And one, it's going to tenderize the meat as it cooks, but two, it's gonna provide a great crust and an even end-to-end salty bite once it is cooked based upon what we've done in the past. I'll be right back. All right, now that we have the dry brine steak resting in the fridge, it's now time to make our marinade and get this one resting, and we're gonna let them both do their thing for 24 hours. First, let's get started with the marinade. You're going to need some red wine right here. I have 3/4 of a cup right here. Now, anytime I cook with red wine, you'll hear me say it's important that you get some of the red wine in you as well as in the recipe. Also, a little bit for the cameraman, the wizard. Salud. And remember, at least 2 glasses of wine per day greatly reduces your chance of giving a shit. That's important. Now that we got the red wine in the bowl and some in the cook, 3/4 red wine in here. Some will tell you, use this type of wine or that type of wine. Come on, man. That's a bunch of malarkey. It might be true for some of you. I say, cook with what you like. If you like it in here, you're gonna like it in here as well. But anyway, 1/4 cup of extra virgin olive oil right there, a tablespoon of onion powder right there, 1/2 tablespoon of black pepper right there, tablespoon of minced garlic right there, and 1 tablespoon of salt. Now, there's a lot of different things you can add to a marinade, a lot of different recipes out there. I like this. I love the flavor of red wine with red meat, both as an accoutrement to my meal, but also in the steak. I find that it provides an excellent flavor balance. So now that I have this all prepared, I'm going to get the marinade and the steak in a bag, and we're gonna let these sit up overnight for 24 hours. And I'm gonna finish the rest of that wine. Both of these steaks have been sitting overnight for 24 hours. The first thing I want to show you is this dry brine steak. That looks about how we'd expect it to look, right? It has just sort of a bright red color, much different than a fresh steak or even this marinated steak. But as we can see, look at those fibers. We can see the salt has really begun to do its thing, right, overnight. It will be interesting to see how that impacts the final flavor. Over here we have the marinated steak. You can see the color there. You can see some of the garlic adhering to it. The the extra virgin olive oil, which sort of coagulated a little bit as it sat in the refrigerator. So just a little bit about how it looks. The most important thing is though, how will it taste? We're gonna get these on the grill and find out. All right, we have a ripping hot fire. Now, let's drop these on. Remember to click your tongue twice. State law. Can you hear that at home? Can you hear those steaks sear? Because that is the sound of tasty. This fire is ripping hot. They're not gonna take long, probably 6 or 7 minutes. Those steaks are looking really good. I pulled both these steaks off at about 120, 122 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a rare temperature. That's the way I prefer my steak. Some initial observations are that our dry brine steak right over here has better sear marks, and that's somewhat expected because it was a drier steak. That is going to promote a better crust versus a wet steak, which is how this marinated steak right here went on the grill, wet. It still ended up with some nice color though, as you can see. It just doesn't have the crosshatch marks that the dry brine steak does. The other distinction I would make relates to feel. This feels like a firmer steak than this. This steak right here has a much softer feel to it. And I think that's right in line with other experiments that we've done like this. I've never done a dry brine versus a marinated, but I have done dry brine versus no brine at all. And when this dry brine sits in the refrigerator overnight, as we saw with the color, a lot of that moisture really begins to come out of the exterior of it, and the opposite's going to be true of the marinated steak. But let's see how they taste. Nice pink color there. I would say that just looking at the exterior, our dry brine steak is a little bit more well done around the edges than our marinated steak is. But I would say pound for pound, color on the inside, they're running about the same. Also, these are sirloin steaks, so they're not necessarily cut evenly end to end. There's some parts of the steak that are a little bit thicker. All right, so as I cut through them, the marinated steak felt a little bit more tender to actually cut through than the dry brine until I cut it into slices. Once I cut it into slices, this dry brine one cut really smoothly, but let's see how they taste. First with the marinated steak. This is how I've always done sirloin steak, marinated, never. First time doing a dry brine. That's soft. I think this marinated too long. That's too long. I gotta try another piece. That's not a good bite. It is, it's a mealy type flavor. Okay, that bite's better. I am getting the red wine. I am getting the garlic. Definitely getting the red wine and garlic. Don't like the texture of that. Let's head on over to the dry brine. That's a great tasting steak. It's super tender. It has the tenderness over here, similar to, I mean, I don't think this is going too far. This has the texture of like a filet mignon. Maybe a little bit more chew to it, but not much. Not what I would typically find and have found in the past with sirloin steaks. I mean, this is a great bite right here. So this has a great texture to it. Not only does it have a great texture and a softness that's just a little bit more chew than a filet, but it has that edge-to-edge saltiness. It's not overpowering, and that's one of the things that I really like about a dry brine. And I have to say, I'm really very surprised by these results. I've always marinated. Now, have I marinated for 24 hours? No, I haven't. I've typically gone 12 or overnight. This is 24 hours. That's longer than I've gone before. I have to have another bite of this. This is a mealy texture. I'm not a fan. That's a no for me, boss. That's it. Maybe the next step of the experiment is to dry brine versus marinade for 12 hours, where maybe a marinade will provide a better result when you're under the gun on a 4 to 6 hour versus a dry brine. But to me, the results are pretty clear. Very obvious. That's not always the case with these steak tests, these steak experiments. If you're going for 24 hours, the dry brine is the winner for me. Have you guys tried this experiment at home? What do you prefer, a dry brine or a marinade? And for how long? We'd love to hear from you. Until then, I got some eating to do. I'll see you guys next time.